It was an extraordinary scene when President Trump went out on the north lawn of the White House after doing an interview with Fox and Friends and got surrounded by this scrum of high decibel reporters all shouting questions at him.
That is really a disgrace.
And Mr. President.
And yet, if you go...
I mean, if you were watching this thing, it was out of control. I mean, the journalists, I get it. Everybody wants to get their question in. You have a rare opportunity to question the President of the United States, but he's there. He's taking questions. They're all talking at once. I mean, it was like an out of control kindergarten class that needed a timeout. It was an embarrassing spectacle. You look at the other people, you ask a question and you ask a question instead. It just looked like here was the president, willing to sort of go into the lion's den, so to speak. I mean, nobody's ever done this. I mean, a couple of times presidents have walked into the briefing room and taken questions, but there was no order about who's going to get to ask questions first. And I just thought it was a really embarrassing moment that they couldn't sort of get it together. Plus, when some of these questions were asked, the president would barely get a sentence out and they kept interrupting him. I'm all for aggressive back and forth with any president, but the whole idea is to elicit information, let the guy answer, let him get 2 sentences out before you step all over his answer. At one point he got annoyed and said, one at a time, and would you let me answer? He called one of the reporters obnoxious. If you look at that whole, it must have gone for about 20 minutes after another 20 or 25 minutes with Steve Doocy. It just, on the one hand, it was great TV, it was entertaining, it was cinema verite, and on the other hand, some of the reporters seem more interested in debating the president than asking him questions. Well, how can you say this? How can you meet with Kim? How can you defend this immigration policy? Aren't you lying? Again, I can't think of another president who would enjoy that as much as he did. I kept thinking as this went on that there must be some aides just out of camera age thinking, okay, that's a wrap. All right, that's all we have time for, wanting to pull the president out of there. I mean, I think Donald Trump enjoys that kind of engagement, shall we say, so much that he could have stood there for another hour and taken questions. He's his best spokesman, more than anybody else who works in the administration. But it reminds me of one other thing, and that's this. From time to time, you see media pundits say, well, the president hasn't held a formal news conference, since his first month in office. Meanwhile, this is a guy who talks to the press almost every day. You see him talking to the press when he walks to the helicopter, when he's, anytime they can catch him. Certainly when he's on the road. He likes doing that. He sees it as a way of getting his message out. He tends to do it in short bursts, but when you're a White House correspondent, I mean, days would go by before they get to ask Barack Obama or George W. Bush a question. It's frustrating. And so here, he gets to make news every day, and he's smart about this. He knows that he has the ability to drive the news cycle, to jump on the day's hot story, and then to do something like he did last Friday, not just the Fox and Friends interview, but willingly walking into that scrum. I don't think anybody, you can quarrel with his answers, you can go after his style, you can nitpick whether he's exaggerating here or there, whether he's not telling the truth. That's all fair game for journalism. I don't think anybody can say at this point that Donald Trump doesn't engage with the press, which is ironic since he's constantly attacking the press, fake news. He used that phrase after the Kim summit, the country's biggest enemy. I thought he went too far. I don't think he should use that kind of language. But despite the fact that he holds the press in such low regard, or major portions of it, he does not shy away. He does not wall himself off. He goes toe-to-toe with journalists. Again, if the journalists could have been a little more restrained, I think it would have been better for getting answers out of the president. And it just looked embarrassing.